All right, we will get started here in just a moment and share the link because we have quite a bit to cover this week on the disqualification show. And we will get started here in just a moment. There we are. Okay. So, no, no shortage of things to talk about here. We begin the weekend with a disqualification in the Xfinity series, following up with the one that we had at Iowa for Ross Chastain, and then what happens tonight? Alex Bowman finally is a winner in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series after years of struggling with smaller and underfunded teams. Just absolutely incredible accomplishment for him. We'd seen so many glimpses of him finally being able to turn things around earlier this year. The run at Kansas that came so close to winning, lap traffic ended up being a factor there. And Brad Keselowski pulling off the victory. Very similar circumstances in this race as well. Lap traffic, again, involving several other cars there, eliminated a large gap that he had over the rest of the field, including Kyle Larson, who was having one of his best runs of the season in the McDonald's car there, running the same paint scheme that could have, would have, should have won at Atlanta earlier this year before some problems. But coming down to it, Alex Bowman could not be denied, and unofficially at least, he is your winner today at Chicagoland, and we now wait for the results from technical inspection, and we find out what will happen. So again, I think it seems that the aero package had again another very successful test here in general. Although there were phases of the race, much like we've seen in other rounds, where the field got strung out quite a bit. There were still people that are actually able to bunch the field up there on restarts. We had just enough tire trouble that you could actually get a few restarts in there and see some surprisingly close competition out there. But yeah, definitely good to see for the competitors back out there. So we'll jump into the action from the weekend here. See if we get a few more people in the show here. In the meantime, unofficially on the other end of the field, we are keeping an eye on Quinn Huff or Houff, finishing last in the Cup Series race today. The first one for Spire Motorsports, the former second team from Furniture Row Racing that they acquired the charter, running old Premium Motorsports machines, and Huff running the car along with several other drivers this year, Garrett Smithley and Justin Haley and others. But the team has not finished last until this weekend. But looks like they had some issues underneath the car that couldn't be fixed. Over the radio, they were saying that there was a weld that failed somewhere underneath the car. They couldn't repair it, and so that was basically the end of their night. And inherited last after a bit of a competition there at the back of the field there. Ty Dillon looked like he was going to snatch it away from Reed Sorensen. Sorensen having trouble early in the race there with the car just slamming the ground there at the beginning of the event, losing several laps in the early stages, had to pit for some adjustments. Then Ty Dillon, apparently, according to some other posts on Twitter, had a loose wheel that cost him a couple laps at the beginning, then a trip to the garage, then really briefly coming back out again, and then pulling back into the garage once more and losing, I believe, about 26 laps at the end of that. And in the middle of all this, of course, the other Rick Ware car, Rick Ware's team going back to 3 cars this week, having the 53 car come back, running a simpler paint scheme than the one we'd seen that David Barrero put together for them back in the Coca-Cola 600. Josh Bilicki running the number 53 car, and BJ McLeod in the 51, and I believe it was Bailey Curry in the 52 car. Full-on group there with the top 3 guys, and them dropping further back. So really bizarre set of circumstances there. But again, Alex Bowman really the star of the evening here. And it did turn out to be the evening, of course, with the rain delay earlier today. I wonder how much of a factor that played into Bowman's ability to have a good run here at Chicagoland after the run at Kansas, since the Kansas race was a night race as well. Although it seemed like he had a good car through the weekend there, and definitely something to be very excited about. So whether or not get the car stuck in the grass after the burnout, a win's a win. And, this is a story much like with Matt Benedetto last week at Sears Point. Again, a driver that's been featured on Last Car a number of times, driving for BK Racing. and had 5 last place finishes for Bowman in the Cup Series, and including, I believe, he had 1 at Talladega driving the old dustless blasting car a few years ago. And I'm just pulling up his statistics here in the meantime. But driving the number 88 car, very difficult circumstances, taking over for Dale Earnhardt Jr. During the injury that would ultimately curtail his career. Very nearly won at Phoenix in one of his first starts with the team, winning the pole and prevailing at the end of the race there. Just a late race restart. Ended up being the difference between winning and losing in that, getting tangled up with Matt Kenseth, and then falling out of the race, falling out of contention at least from there. I'm sure that was going through his mind at the end of this race here, where he had a long green flag run towards the finish and a one-on-one battle with a guy who was really working the outside lane at all these tracks, these 1.5 miles, and trying to make it work. And so many times we'd seen with Kyle Larson where the outside wall has bitten him and dropped him out of contention in his own right. And this one here, where you saw Kyle Busch make that mistake, and Kevin Harvick had problems with his tires, and Clint Boyer falling out with right rear problems through the entire night. Good to see Kyle Larson get through there and actually wage war there with Bowman at the end. And how good is it to see a race where people could actually get past inside the final 10 laps and then not just, lay back and then, just see the person get an insurmountable lead and then trail off into the sunset. A very different set of circumstances here where you actually had a good battle at the finish. So certainly good to see. Just looking here. Let's see. So Alex Bowman, looking at his statistics here, he had, again, 5 last place finishes in the Cup Series, including the most recent one of those was at Kentucky, actually just last year, so almost a year to the day of his most recent last place finish in the Cup Series, where he had a crash there. I believe, if memory serves, he also finished last in the All-Star race last year, which was the first for Hendrick Motorsports in several years in that event. The first one he had was the dustless blasting car in 2014 in October. The fall race there, he had a crash after 102 laps, one of the records for some of the most laps completed in the Cup Series race before finishing last at Talladega. And the other 3 occurred with Tommy Baldwin's team. And this was at a time where he and Landon Castle were in a very tight battle for the last car championship in 2015. Castle ended up prevailing at the end of that season. And Bowman was very close, however, including a very close battle with Jeff Gordon at Indianapolis that year, where it looked like Gordon was going to have his first last place finish in several years, and it ended up being Bowman there with an engine failure during the Brickyard 400. So again, a bit of a connection there between Hendrick Motorsports and Alex Bowman. But again, a very different set of circumstances today. The second place finishes that he's had this year and trying to get his feet back under him, going into a stretch of the season where we do have more of these 1.5 miles. I mean, Kentucky coming up before too much longer, and then going back at different tracks. We go back to Daytona next week, where Bowman and his teammate William Byron were on the front row earlier this year. Certainly going to be another thing to look forward going ahead there. But I'm sure a huge weight lifted off Bowman's shoulders as he, again, has ascended through the ranks of at least 2 different small teams through the ranks between BK Racing and Tommy Baldwin Racing just a couple of years ago, getting the call of a lifetime over at Hendrick Motorsports. You think back, further back to Jimmy Means getting a ride opportunity at Hendrick Motorsports. You think of Greg Sachs, and they ran the movie team that was originally going to be set up for Days of Thunder, ended up becoming the number 18 Slim Fast car. Sachs very nearly won some races in 1990. Including the July race at Daytona, where he had a big field clearing wreck in that one. And Bowman getting a very similar opportunity to that. And, I think it's very appropriate, actually, that Bowman's throwback scheme in Darlington this September is going to be an old Tim Richmond throwback. So you have kind of that element thrown in there as well. But excellent run for him there. I mean, this may be the disqualification show, but it's certainly not something that we're hoping for, for disqualification. I mean, we never really do. But it's a story that could potentially be the case, because it certainly was yesterday in the Saturday Xfinity Series race. Much like we had the situation at Iowa, it was just basically finishing up a Jeff Green article there. And then I see all these tweets showing up on my list here about Christopher Bell getting docked for the car being too low in the front and then too high in the right rear. He ends up getting disqualified and classified last after finishing 3rd in the race. different circumstances from Ross Chastain's situation in Iowa as not being the winner. But very similar to the most recent example of an Xfinity Series driver finishing last because of disqualification. The most recent example being Johnny Sauter back in 2005 when he had an oversized carburetor in an old James Finch car. But a situation like that, I believe he finished 14th in that race before he was sent to the back. We have the articles for both the Xfinity race and the Truck Series race are already posted. Most of those back during the rain delay we had during today's Cup Series race. The Cup article, I'm going to push to try to get that up later tonight. So really, yeah, really a different, really an interesting situation there that, you know, there was, I'm seeing comments in the chat here about the runs that these drivers are able to get with this new aero package. And it was interesting to see Kyle Larson be able to do something with that because Larson had been very vocal about the aero package just not working for him. I believe when he had the last place run at Richmond earlier this year, had a bad crash there. There were complaints about having the car really hit the track really hard and really mess with the handling of the car. We'd heard similar transmissions between Reed Sorensen and his crew over at Premium Motorsports during this race. And the handling was so bad that they had to actually kind of pull down pit road very early in the event. But yeah, fantastic race out there. I think there's a lot of positives to take from it. There's a lot of questions still outstanding about the aero package and where exactly it works and where it does not. Maybe we'll see a situation very similar to the plate races where they have a very different package versus the other races on the 1.5 mile tracks. If they have something that works better at the short tracks or at the road courses. And that was an issue that Parker Kligerman brought up last week at Sonoma, where he was talking about how they're actually the track has become more aerodependent at the road courses, and specifically Sears Point, which is strange because that track is so much more technical and challenging and not as fast as Watkins Glen. But he said aero still played a role in there, and the air conditioning, of course, being an issue at the same time, the air circulation. We saw a bit of an issue with that tonight as well, not just in the pre-race segment that Jeff Burton put together there, as well as Kyle Petty mentioning an interview with Landon Castle about the concerns about this air circulation in the cars, but also the issue with Kyle Busch during the race, where smoke from what I believe what they said was like some chunks from all the tire failures he had during the race, and the crush panel coming loose, circulating some smoke in there that he just couldn't see. I don't know how he was able to drive that during that stage of the race. I thought they were going to pop the upper window off the other side there and try to vent it out a little bit during the pit stop, but a green flag stop just didn't allow for that apparently, and coming around to finish the race there. But you know, it'll be an interesting thing to see there going forward. But a great move by Alex Bowman there at the end, and not I think you had a situation here in this race where you had two drivers that neither of them were going to give up. You had both of them being very much determined to win their first race of the season, to end a long losing streak. Again, we mentioned all the frustrations that Kyle Larson's had this year, and after missing the cut in the playoffs last year, after a very fortunate situation came into his lap there at the Roval there when he got wrecked and passed the stalled car of Jeffrey Earnhardt to make it into the next round. You know, I'm sure looking to try to turn things around. That's going to be a very different thing this year, but we look ahead to Daytona next week and the possibility of, again, I would say that this is going to be a race where, again, you could see another first-time winner. It always has the potential of that, you know, like an Alex Bowman type or somebody that's actually trying to break through this year. Kyle Larson has, of course, not really been a driver that's done too well at the plate races, seems very outspoken in how much he dislikes running them. But maybe we'll see what he does going forward. There we go. Thank you, JPS Racing 74. I'm glad you like the shirt. This is one of got this back in, a couple of years ago after the I think it was the first throwback weekend they had at Darlington when they ran this ortho scheme. I like the this is one thing. I mean, just as an aside here, one thing that I'm always very adamant about is the way that they do the souvenir haulers at the tracks. I am a big proponent of when they had the large store in the infield. I know that everybody likes the trailers and stuff and going up to the counter and everything, but it's not the most efficient way to do that. I think the best way to do it is just put everything into one spot and let people handle things and look for them, because you're always stuck in a long line, and it always takes forever. And maybe you want this item versus that item. I bring that up in this case, and I believe I found this one. They had like a discount section of just like stuff they're just trying to get rid of. Found this for like just a couple of bucks there. So that's something I kind of missed from that, and maybe that's something that gets re-explored looking forward. I'm not sure what the existing agreement is with the tracks and everything, but that's something I definitely enjoyed from back then. But what I'm definitely enjoying as well is just these close races here, and getting people that are actually comers and goers, and a race also that you feel like you're actually able to say something about a lot of the different competitors in the race. We saw Joey Logano during this race actually slapping the wall a number of times, making some crazy moves. And you can't talk about crazy moves without talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who for much of this race seemed to be making these just insane passes on the inside of the track there, especially going into turn number 3. We think about Daytona next week. I mean, certainly Stenhouse was a driver that found himself the center of controversy, much like Ernie Irvan a whole generation before. Just winning both of the stages last year at Daytona, but causing both of the biggest wrecks in the entire event. And he was involved in one of the accidents at the Daytona 500 this year as well. That's going to be something interesting to see. But it's a different thing. Again, looking at the competition in the Chicagoland race, I think last year we had a good finish, but maybe not a great race in general. We saw plenty of references already to the slide job call that Dale Jr. did and everything. But this one and all, I mean, really, it was a very compelling race. And and then to cap it off with a first-time winner and 2 drivers just slugging it out. I was wondering if Logano was going to work his way back up there and get through lap traffic, and suddenly we had a 3-car battle. I think it was very much very close to that situation. At least it seemed that way on the video. I don't remember what the interval was, but that was kind of the situation there. Yeah, no, I mean, it's really happy for Bowman on this one. I think there's it's going to get him a lot more attention there, and I think it's certainly gratifying the risk that was assumed by Hendrick Motorsports, if you can call it that. If you can call it a risk, that is, to bring on a driver that has been trying to work his way up the ranks here and get a chance in the Cup Series. That's certainly what all these guys are trying for. Again, thinking back to Matt DiBenedetto last week, that was the opportunity that he was looking for after working with Go Fast Racing and with the other, with also with BK Racing. Actually, I got my BK Racing sticker right on here, the Corey LaJoie version here, but very much appropriate for the theme here of finding your way up the ranks. I think that's really a big concern that people have about the quality of the fields these days and which drivers are actually competing in it now. I know it's something that I've raised myself. Are we seeing the best quality drivers out there? Are we seeing guys that are really earning their way into the Cup Series, or is everybody just a pay driver these days? And you see somebody like a situation with Alex Bowman or Matt DiBenedetto, and you see that these are guys that actually ran really underfunded teams. In DiBenedetto's case, he was running start and part teams for a number of years. I mean, he drove for both the Motorsports Group and TriStar Motorsports in the Xfinity Series, and took the Xfinity Last Car Championship that one year in the 10 car. But a different set of circumstances here for these guys, and maybe that's the trajectory of things nowadays. Is that you have a guy that they still try to run in these underfunded cars here, and they try to show what they can do, and then they get a chance to run in with the big guys. I mean, we see this with Bowman, we see this with even Eric Jones to a degree, although the second Furniture Row car was certainly a good quality ride, and he had some good quality runs in it. Maybe not the most ideal situation, since, of course, it led to ultimately Furniture Row closing its doors. It was surprising they couldn't maintain that second car there. But Jones, again, returning to the scene of his inaugural Cup victory last year when he was driving the 20 car there, as he still drives now, of course. But that'll be interesting. The quality of the broadcast. I'm seeing a lot of discussion of this in the chat, and I'll definitely jump in on that as well. I mentioned last week I really liked the send-off that Fox did for Darrell Waltrip. I think that they really pulled out all the stops there to do the best thing that they could. And I thought maybe it was just because it was like my home track and being at the races versus actually watching it on TV, and that's the only experience there. But I felt the quality was a little bit better than it had been in previous races. I felt like I had a better understanding of the toing and froing in there and all that. And it was it wasn't it wasn't as obnoxious as in some cases some Fox broadcasts tend to be. Way too many graphics, way too much music drowning out segments. You can't hear people talk. Also, the adjustments where the level of the sound design where you hear the cars versus the level that you hear the announcers. It used to be an older broadcast, kind of like if you look at the video that I did last week, you hear a lot more of the audio on the cars side, and then the announcers are drowned out a bit, which is fine because you want to get the experience of actually being at the track there. I think in some of the Fox broadcast ones, they kind of shift it the other direction. It's very hard to actually hear the cars go by. I think that's one part of it. But in the NBC broadcast, again, there's things I think that could be worked on as well. But I like the Blues Brothers sketch. I thought that was really cool. I mean, those are fun things. Those are things that kind of remind me of like an ESPN kind of sketch. Like, I mean, ESPN wasn't above doing sketches, and I don't. I'd rather the broadcasts act like comedy shows and the commercials act like comedy shows. I think that's really the trend that we've found ourselves in now, where maybe there's not as much reception to those things like that anymore. But a very interesting situation there. I thought the broadcast was pretty good. I'm still critical a bit of Rick Allen because I think he just throws numbers around like a bingo game and just saying like the 5, the 12, the 43, the 42, the 42, and the 18. It's like, I don't know. It's a different style. Every announcer has their style, and I know that's ingrained as much as you can, and that's just what it is. And it's strange though, because I think that if you look, I mean, I got to listen to more of Rick's work in the Truck Series back then. It seemed like he had a different approach to the Truck Series broadcast where he did less of throwing around numbers and did more of the drivers' names, which was more critical in that series because he had so many people that were newcomers coming in and new names he had to talk about. You think about Donnie Leo winning his only Truck Series race over at Mansfield years ago, and that kind of a situation. Yeah, there's certain trends with the Rick Allen broadcast that are, it's not so much of an issue of tone as it is with Adam Alexander on the Fox side there, where it just sounds a little distant from what he's describing. But it's more just the repetitive nature of some of these things here. And and I like that Jeff Burton brought back the kind of the Wally's World kind of inspired thing where you do the lap with the celebrity in the car. I think that's good. And actually, I like that they do the thing where they're out there and then they actually open it up there for a lap. And I guess I forgot who the guy was that was in the car there, but I guess he was a really tall guy because his knee was like stuck up against the dashboard. It was reminding me that was kind of something that happened when I was riding with David Smith last week, or Dave Smith, the K&N series driver. The only way I could get that footage from the video there, as shaky as it was just bracing my knee up against the dashboard in the car there. So I could definitely empathize with that. I can't imagine what that would be like in a Cup car there in comparison. But that's kind of the thing. And I like, Junior seemed fine. I mean, Steve Letarte also. I mean, Steve Letarte is the term that I found myself using during the broadcast is just he is relentlessly positive. Almost in a Michael Waltrip sense, but a little bit more toned down than that. But I mean, it's just like, you sense this. I think I talked about this in past shows. When you read like Steve Letarte's book, Leading the Way, which is very good, by the way, you kind of get this sense where he's always been in this position where he's tried to kind of build somebody back up and just be a positive influence, and certainly played a significant role in the closing years of Dale Jr.'s career, driving the 88 car. And again, kind of bringing it full circle again with Bowman this weekend and winning with that team again. Yeah, I mean, it was a different thing to see. But yeah, so that was an interesting deal there. I thought the broadcast was pretty good. Again, there's some things that always kind of chafe at me a bit, but I think it seemed like they kind of muted some of those a little bit. They weren't as accentuated as much. Of course, I think the big thing, and I don't know, I'm curious what you guys think about this too, is the Running Down a Dream cover that they use for the opening. I always get a kick out of cranking that up at the start of the broadcast, but I know what gets irritating during the broadcast is they always play like the same 5-second clip from the song there. And the problem with that particular song is that it's basically 90% the hook. So you have like just that beat in the background over and over and over and over again. And so I remember watching the Kentucky race last year during that, and we had a guest over who was watching it, and I just started laughing after a while because I was wondering like what he was thinking, just hearing the same loop over and over again. They didn't have different music or anything, and I know that they're not, other networks weren't above that either. I mean, ESPN had their own music and everything, but they at least had a couple different tracks. They had those different covers of the Speed World theme that were great, and different ways to lead into things, and Fox had a selection of songs that they would try. ESPN had the later ESPN after 2007 tried to do the same thing as Fox did, but a lot of their music choices were just awful. I mean, they did a lot of pop music that it fit on the surface. I mean, doing like "Shut Up and Drive" and stuff like that. It just wasn't quite the level that it became more distracting than having an instrumental piece. At least the "Running Down a Dream" thing, they kind of try to do that, but that's a whole different deal there. But let me look at the rest of the Cup results here. So Jimmy Johnson, a great finish for him, fourth place finish there. Looked like he had one of his best runs this year. I mean, really. Just in general here. Didn't he have the pole at Kansas earlier this year? I thought he had a pole at a 1.5-mile track earlier this year, and he was in a very similar situation where he was getting the lead and then just trying to hang on to it as for all as he could. It seemed like in this one he was actually mixing it up with the leaders, and he was actually staying in it and not having to drive defensively. He was driving more aggressively in this one. Not to say that he hadn't in other times. Again, I think back to Watkins Glen last year, but great run for him. Glad you could see him pull that off. William Byron has really turned things around with Jimmy's old crew chief here after starting up front at Sears Point last week. Comes into this one, gets in their top 10, finishes 8th, leads 9 laps. So great run for the 24 team. Good time to peak going into the halfway point of the season and try to shore up a spot in the playoffs. We'd seen him fall in and out of the top 16 through most of this year. Austin Dillon, who got one of the drivers that got his first last place finish at Chicagoland, gets a top 10 after winning the pole position in this one. Wasn't disqualified or anything in the pre-race tech. Started on the pole position there, finishing in the 10th spot. Kevin Harvick had what looked like a good run there. I mean, to say the least, leading 132 laps. But ultimately, tire woes and pit stops and all kinds of things, just literally the wheels fell off of that car, and ended up finishing in the 14th spot for him. We mentioned Ricky Stenhouse earlier, a 13th place finish for him, and the results there, a good showing to carry him into Daytona. Chris Buescher losing a lap towards the end of the race there, ended up finishing the first car 1 lap down as Bowman and Larson were driving through the field there, still finishing in the 18th spot. Let's see. Michael McDowell had a great qualifying run earlier in the week, finished 20th at the end of the day. Maybe not the best run, but he still finished ahead of Kyle Busch with all the problems that he had there. So I guess that's something that they can put in their back pocket. And McDowell will be another one driver to watch next week at Daytona, because remember last year, he probably had the best car in that race before getting eliminated in a race wreck at the end, very similar to Matt DiBenedetto's run in the Daytona 500 earlier this year. I think both of them could be a great discount if you're looking for a dark horse pick between the 95 and the 34. As to which one, I mean, it's a tough call, but I mean, certainly, DiBenedetto's got some good momentum there after Sears Point, although he only finished 27th in this race today. Ross Chastain, we talked about Chastain's disqualification back at Iowa. What doesn't get talked about as much is the great run he had in the number 15 car here just today, finishing in 26th spot, finishing ahead of fully funded long-time chartered teams like the 95 with DiBenedetto, the 47 with Ryan Preece, 36 with Matt Tifft. List goes on from down from there. And then further down the rankings there, again, we mentioned Ty Dillon with the loose wheel issue, dropping him back to the 35th spot. BJ McLeod's situation there leaves him the last car running in 36th. Clint Boyer just had an absolute disastrous run out there and ends up getting what I believe is, no, it's not his worst finish this year, because he did finish last at Fontana earlier this season, but ends up finishing in the 37th spot after starting 6th with crash damage. And and I'm looking at the results here as they've now been updated. No calls yet as to the disqualification, but the unofficial results have been updated. It cites track bar as the reason that Quinn Huff finished last. So I guess the track bar was the weld that failed that they couldn't fix on the car. Now, that may be a first-time reason for a last place finish. I believe so. I will check that to make sure. So I had to update the rankings on that. I know we had an issue with the track bar earlier. I think it was at Dover in one of the truck races, I believe it was. Or is there a truck or Xfinity, I think. They had a driver that didn't finish last but did fall out with track bar issues. And somebody asked me about that, if that had happened before. I don't believe it has happened. No. So I do not see it. I do not see it on here. No. So if that does stand up and we do have a last place finish for Quinn Huff, it would be not only his first last place finish and the first last place finish for Spire Motorsports, but it would be also the first last place finish with the specific reason being the track bar on the car. So history all around in this sense. And it would also be a 3-race sweep of first-time last place finishers in their respective series. Christopher Bell's disqualification, the Xfinity Series race, was his first. The Xfinity Series, although not his first in NASCAR's top 3 series, he finished last in at least one, in exactly one Truck Series race, having a first lap engine failure. I believe it was at Texas. And but then in the Truck Series race that we had this past weekend, Ben Rhodes blows up right at the start, and that was his first last place finish there. So the features from this week's article are going to be more heavy in actual driver profiles here, which is great. That's something I try to really ramp up more when you get a first-time last place finisher, and try to give a bit of more context to who the driver is besides the person that finished last in this race and that one as well. So that'll be another thing to talk about here in the article. Let's see. Oh goodness, I forgot about Alex Bowman's K&N car from last year. Thank you, Auto Rockin' Racing 94. That was the that car that almost broke the internet last year at Sears Point. I gotta dig that up. Where is that? I know I have the picture still in here. I gotta find that. But there was the car that the old I think it was a McNally car, and they tried to put the Camaro grill on a Gen 4 car, and of course the Gen 4 car has the nose pulled so backwards and to a certain degree that you end up with a situation where it just looks like a big frown on it. Let me get that pulled up here. It was last year's race. We always try to find the right folder here. And see, that's the thing with Bowman. You know, you have these moments, and you forget about him because he's just been out there so long. Maybe not as long as some other competitors here, but still to a degree where you have you have him as the story here. Okay, let's see. One thing I'm going to be working on going forward, and I was actually kind of kicking this around, is I'm going to try to get like a monitor or something set up background here to get some visual aids in here. In the meantime, we're going to do it a little bit more low tech, and I'm just going to pull this up on the screen. I do have the picture here. We'll see how well this shows up on camera. I'm going to pop this over here. But yeah, that's the one. That one right there. So yeah, that 24 car that Bowman ran, I believe they had like a loss of oil pressure or something that weekend. But you can't tell in that shot there, but that was basically the same paint scheme that he ran this weekend, the Exalta scheme on that. And so, yeah, that was one that definitely stood out that weekend. But that's always that deal there. Let's see. But yeah, did Bowman lead? I'm seeing the comment there. Bowman led 88 laps today. I didn't see that in the results. Let me look there. Yeah, it does show that. It says Bowman led 88 laps. Good catch there. Good, yeah. Good catch, piece of metal. So let's see. Where are we with the clock here? I think we're busting right through it this time around. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So we are coming down at least about an hour and 10 minutes. Oh, no. It can't be that long into it. No. Let's see. This is math. It's a problem. It's always a problem. We're about 50 minutes into it. So there we go. So we'll see what happens on that going forward. Oh yeah, and I'm seeing some more traffic on Twitter here about the statistic that he'd finished in every single position in the field there, including all the way back to 43rd, I believe. No, just 1 to 40. Okay, never mind. Although he did drive in the era where he had 43 cars driving for BK and had some struggles there. I can personally verify that he had some of the finishes there further back. But yeah, it says 11th active driver to finish every spot between 1 and 40. So, and then this was the last one that he needed on there. Thank you, Corey the Joy fan. Yeah, I was just wearing the I'm trying to bring out different shirts and stuff for these videos here, give you some different visual aids. And like I say, I'm looking to doing like a screen, maybe setting it up over here or something like that. Kind of trying to see what would work good for work well for a live deal here, but we'll look ahead to that. Let me look at some more stuff from the Xfinity Series race here as we continue to wait for the results here. I don't see anything on this feed. Let me keep this open to the correct page. And crazy weather today too. Before we leave on the Cup race entirely, and we'll jump back and forth through it anyway. This is the craziness there about running 11 laps and actually having a little bit of a good last place battle and a first place battle, actually, for that matter, before those huge wall clouds rolled in. And them talking about the skies turning green. I'm always thinking about that scene from Twister with Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt, where they're talking about the sky going green and doing that whole thing. Yeah, it was an interesting situation there. I hope everybody stayed safe there at the track and found shelter. I'm not hearing any other reports to the contrary, but it's that provided a little bit of craziness there, reminding me of Kansas back in, I think it was 2007 when Greg Biffle won it, and they had a rain delay that was so long it seemed like the race was going to get postponed, and then they were just pushing to get it in there before it got dark because they didn't have lights at the time. So that was a different situation. Let's see. Okay. Bob Pockers posted 27 minutes ago that he's expecting tech to be complete somewhere between 10:30 and 11 p.m. Eastern. So that would be approximately 18 minutes from now would be the opening of that window. So we're going to be a bit close here. That would be on the earlier estimate from the timer that I started on here, which is more or less at the wrap up to the race there. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, and I see the Zachary Grafe and Chris Knight pointed out the 88 laps thing. Okay, good deal. Good deal. So, Cole Custer winning in the Xfinity Series race in dominant fashion, 151 of 200 laps led. He was not the one that was disqualified, as we mentioned. The third place finisher, Christopher Bell, was disqualified. Jeff Green had run just 11 laps at the beginning of the race, pulled behind the wall with electrical issues. This happened at the same time that his teammate Josh Bilicki failed to qualify in one of the other RSS racing cars, the number 93 car. Bilicki ended up swapped in for Bailey Curry in the number 17 car, which is a Rick Ware Racing entry, and ended up finishing in the 35th spot. The disqualification of Bell that came up a little bit afterwards was ultimately bumped Joey Gase out of the bottom 5 and put Timmy Hill on the very edge of it. And that ended up being Bell's first last place finish in the Xfinity Series. And the first for car number 20 since, I believe, what was the statistic? Since it was 2000 with Scott Wimmer, like way back. And I didn't realize, I figured somebody probably had struggled in one of Joe Gibbs' cars or anything in that time period, but this is going back really far. Let me pull up the statistic here itself. Yes, November 11th, 2000, when Scott Wimmer drove the AT&T Pontiac fielded by Bill Davis Racing and crashed out 13 laps into the Xfinity Series finale at Homestead. And this was actually an interesting race at that time because, as I mentioned in the article there, it was 9 days before Wimmer actually made his Cup Series debut, which actually had an interesting story of its own. Wimmer was actually going to start the ARCA race, which ended up being rain postponed. There was a lot of rain in Atlanta the entire weekend, which is very common back when Atlanta was the finale in November. The Cup race got pushed to Monday. The ARCA race got pushed to Monday as well. But as part of the ARCA, while Cup qualifying got in, And Jerry Nadeau got to start on the front row along with Jeff Gordon. Nadeau ended up scoring his only Cup Series victory that day. Scott Wimmer wasn't able to start the ARCA race and drive the number 20 car in that. He failed to qualify because the field was set by points, I believe, and as a part-time effort, he wasn't able to get into the show. So they took the same car, the number 20 car. They did a real hasty job changing the 0 into a 3 because, of course, you had Tony Stewart already running the number 20 in the Cup Series and entered it in the Cup race. And Wimmer qualified. I believe he led a couple of laps even and had a halfway decent finish. So, a bit of history there with the number 20 car. With Scott Wimmer, a name that maybe isn't as familiar to fans these days, but used to be the heir apparent for Bill Davis Racing back then when Ward Burton was trying different options there. Wimmer almost getting a victory in the 2004 Daytona 500 before Dale Jr. pulled it off there, pulling off a top 5 finish on a bit of tire strategy with, I believe he had was that Frankie Stoddard on the pit box back then? I know there was Tony Baldwin was involved with the team there, but a different time for sure. The first race also under Nextel's sponsorship contract back then. Let me look up Wimmer's finish in the 2000 Atlanta race. And how many runs did he actually have? 111 Cup starts as recently as 2011. And yes, he finished 22nd out of 43 cars in that race. So a great run for Wimmer starting out. And he did lead 9 laps in that event. So, great run for Wimmer. And also that was the last broadcast for ESPN, at least the Bob Jenkins era of ESPN that had begun in 1981. That was the last broadcast for that. A lot of history is kind of the big subject this evening. Hope to kind of continue to do that in future episodes here of the Disqualification Show. But that was a good deal there. Do I think that Jimmy Johnson will make the playoffs this year? If he runs like he did today, I don't see why he wouldn't. He's in a situation where he may have to just point his way in. I believe I got to check the point standings there again, but that should put him very close to the top 16 again, if not put him back in. I know Ryan Newman's in a tight battle with him right now. Eric Jones is right up there too. So you have a mix of both veterans and newcomers up there that are really contesting those final 1 or 2 spots there in the championship rankings. And Kyle Larson, of course, same situation. If he keeps running like he did tonight, that could put him in there as well. I would put him in the same category as Jimmy, given the struggles that both of them had at the first part of the season. But could he make it in? Yeah, it's certainly in the realm of possibility. But Daytona is going to be a big question mark for both of them. It always is, but particularly with Hendrick having a great showing at Daytona earlier this year to start the season off, Jimmy winning the Clash, and the Hendrick guys sweeping the front row. Then you have the other side of it there. So not sure about Kyle Larson at Daytona, but things can always turn around. You never know. It's also interesting again. Look at Matt DiBenedetto, and you look at the Levine family racing team. You can't talk about that without talking about Casey Kane's great run in Daytona last July. Before he was ultimately forced into retirement because of the heat exhaustion he suffered at Darlington in September, one of his last great runs was in the July Daytona race last year. He was running like a blue and white car, and he was right up there at the lead there with Eric Jones, surviving a lot of the accidents and looked like he had a really legitimate shot at pulling off the victory. Ultimately, Jones worked his way by, and the victory ended up being his first of the series. Perhaps that had a reason why the 95 team was as good as it was at Daytona this year. Of course, the new alignment with Gibbs and the switch to Toyota certainly played a role in that as well. But they seemed like they had some good notes to already build from Kane's effort at Daytona. And Kane, of course, has had a couple of good runs there at Daytona in the past. There was another run he had that was really good with Hendrick Motorsports before he got eliminated towards the end. I believe that was the year that Jimmy won both races back in 2013, if memory serves. But a different deal for that. So again, a lot of we mentioned Michael McDowell, we mentioned the other teams there. So that'll be interesting going forward. Do we have a call? It looks like I'm seeing in the chat we may have a call. So let's make sure right away that we do. I'm going to check the progress page here. I am not seeing it on his page so far. I will continue to look here in the meantime. If we do have a call, we will certainly get to that point here and take a look. Let me check this one. All right, so that was about an hour ago. Do we have anything on this channel? Regroup, okay. Was 88 laps. Okay, we got that. I'm not seeing it yet here. Still in a holding pattern. I see your comment there, Tom Caron. I'm going to just keep looking here. Let's see. Sue, 12th full-time active on my account. All right, I'm not seeing the comment in Pocris's page here. I'll look at a couple other ones here in the meantime. But as we remain in a holding pattern here, waiting the results for that whole deal. Again, so many great comments here about Bowman in general here. Jeff Gluck just posted this an hour ago, saying Alex Bowman was once fired from Tommy Baldwin Racing and found out about it on Twitter. His career could have ended right there. That was only 3.5 years ago, and now he's a Cup Series winner for freaking Hendrick Motorsports. I mean, that says it all right there. I didn't realize he'd been fired by Tommy Baldwin Racing. I know that they had a rough season in 2015 there, but I don't know how much of that was just a mutual decision to part ways. Apparently, that was not the case, and that was ultimately that. But now we have Tommy Baldwin Racing is really barely out there now. I mean, they attempted Daytona this year with Ryan Truex. I don't know if they're going to come back and try to run again this weekend, but we'll find out. But in the meantime, Bowman in the interim here pulls off his first victory, which is just outstanding on that end. So, situation with that. You think about all those second place finishes. I mean, we mentioned Casey Kane earlier. Very similar to Kane's career there, where he finished second all those times in 2004, the first part of 2005, and then finally pulled off his first victory at Richmond. The first-time winners, those are always the outstanding ones. I mean, we talk about Jerry Nadeau at Atlanta in 2000. Another Hendrick Motorsports driver that was able to break through a first win. Had very similar background to Bowman in that sense, in that he earned this ride, the 25 car, a team that had been really underperforming, had been really seeking an identity of its own. Had some successful drivers. You certainly talk about Tim Richmond. You talk about Ken Schrader. And then after that, trying to get Ricky Craven going before he got injured in 97. You bring in Wally Dahlin back. You bring in Randy LaJoie. You bring in a number of other drivers there. And then they bring in Jerry Nadeau because he had this sponsorship from Michael Holligan, and the sponsor wanted Nadeau, and he was able to carry that over to Hendrick and had just a career season that year, was very close to winning several races, much like Bowman. And at the very last round of the season, was able to pull off a victory at Atlanta. And as we mentioned, that was the only victory of his career. Certainly looking at Bowman now, with all the second place finishes he had this year, this not being his first year driving the number 88, but just getting into it full time these last couple of seasons. Great turnaround for him and pulling off the victory. We again wait for the results from technical inspection, but that should have we should get news on that very soon. We're coming up on about 7 minutes for the initial call here. I'm not seeing anything on that. Pocris is posting a number of articles from the past here on Bowman that were discussed earlier. Let's see. Looking at the Xfinity Series results, it's unfortunate Brandon Brown couldn't get a top 20 there to keep kind of his effort going there. Finishing in the 22nd position. That streak had already kind of gone by the wayside of having those consecutive top 20s, but Gray Galding continuing to have good runs, finishing in the 14th spot, getting sponsorship from Worldwide Safety Consulting on the number 08 from Bobby Daughter's team. He ended up the last car on the lead lap in Saturday's Xfinity Series race. Ross Chastain, you mentioned his good run in the Cup Series this weekend. Of course, his win at Gateway last week. And then having the good 8th place finish driving again for Colleague Racing, getting the number 10 car back into the show, finishing right behind his teammate Justin Haley. And let's see, looking at other drivers, Joey Logano, the only Cup Series winner in the field there, really being a factor in that after the deal there. But still not pulling off the victory, only leading 20 of the laps there. Cole Custer just had his number there at the end and pulled off that victory. Good to see XCI Racing back with Jeffrey Earnhardt, the number 81 car. They end up with just a 16th place finish. Same thing with the H2 Motorsports effort with Shane Lee. Apparently, it's not just an effort that they're going to run with Iowa when they had the sponsorship with Circuit City. They had an associate brand on the car this week and ended up finishing in the where was it? The 18th position, the Titan Mining Rigs Toyota that week. So one lap down for him. Ended up being kind of a stacked list there at the back of the field. We had 41 cars for 38 spots after the 17 team turned out to not be withdrawing from the effort as they had at Iowa. So you had 3 teams, sent home. Not only Josh Balicki's effort with RSS Racing we talked about earlier, but Joe Nemechek, I mean, a longtime competitor in Cup, Xfinity, and trucks, and still active these days. Couldn't get Carl Long's car quite into the show. Morgan Shepherd, his resume goes on for years there. Not able to get the number 89 car into the show. We'll see how many of these teams show up at Daytona because there's always that different strategy on the super speedways versus these other tracks. But that'll be interesting to see the coming weekend here. So, yeah, Ryan Sieg there. Yeah, good. I didn't catch the Xfinity race live, but it's good to see that. Where did Sieg actually pull off in that race? Jump back into that because that's again been one of the big seasons. Yeah, 12th place finish. I mean, the Big Green Egg Company came on board, new paint scheme for him, finishing on the lead lap in the 12th spot. Where does that put him in the points there? Ryan Sieg 12th in the points, 281 points out of the lead. He's just ahead of Gray Galding there. Galding up to 13th, Brandon Brown to 14th after Ross Chastain declaring for the Truck Series points. That's opened the door again for a possibility of both those drivers, contending for spots in the playoffs there, if not making it in. That'll be certainly interesting going forward as we get into this stretch run. Again, Daytona for them as well, running the Friday race. We could see some craziness in there as well. It's unfortunate that Jimmy Means' team struggled there with David Starr. That's another team that in the past with Joey Gase, for example, has really had some great runs at Daytona. Ryan Sieg, we talked about him, having good runs in that. Hopefully it'll be interesting to see how different it will be, if at all, from what we saw in February, where it was a very calm, very uneventful race on Saturday. But that'll be one of the stories going ahead. The race definitely takes on a different complexion with the heat in the summer, and rain always seems to come through and affect at least one session during the weekend. But hopefully it holds off and we get a good competition that weekend. Going back to the Truck Series, we talked about Ben Rhodes falling out at the first lap. Engine problems with the number 99 ended up dropping him to the last spot there. Joey Gase, we mentioned him, and the bottom 5, BJ McLeod, Norm Benning, and Joe Nemechek rounding out your bottom 5 in that race. Bit more competition than this one, certainly. Brett Moffitt and what was a basically unsponsored effort, the GMS Racing team, bumps and bangs the heck out of the number 24 truck, leads 72 laps, and ends up winning the race there over Brandon Jones. Again, another Kyle Busch Motorsports effort, much like we saw at Gateway with Ross Chastain, falling just short at the finish. And speaking of falling just short, we can't talk about that without talking about Stuart Friesen, who is again still looking for his first series win. Only manages the 3rd place finish in this one. He just continues to rack up the top 5s. But we're entering a stretch of the season where we again could see him be a legitimate threat, not only at Eldora, where he had such a good run in the past, but also when we go to Mosport and doing the home track up there in Ontario. Could be some place that we see him actually step up to the plate there and perhaps have an even better run. Ross Chastain finishing in the 7th spot, continuing to keep his effort going there after the great run, the win at Gateway, and now try to get into the top 20 in points. Apparently he's much closer to that now after looks like finishes of, let's see, not a top 10 finish in stage 1, but then an 8th place finish in stage 2, and then a 7th place finish in the race itself worth 32 points. That's certainly moving in a positive direction. Let's see. Good to see Jesse Iwuji back out there, the number 34 truck. It looked like they had some issues during the race there with the hood about to pop up on that thing. I don't know if that was damage occurred during the race or something going on with that. But regardless, good to see the Realm team actually field 3 trucks now. They got the 32 out there that they've been running the last couple of weeks and keeping that deal going. Also good to see Dylan Lupton back into the truck series. I mean, back for a couple of years. We hadn't seen him in any of NASCAR's top 3 series since the Xfinity series last year when his ride at JGL Racing with James Whitner's team fell through after the team closed its doors. Lupton ends up finishing in the 10th spot in this race. Also earns his first stage points, as somebody pointed out there on social media the other day. A great run for him on that. So, let's see. Okay, and I see your comment there. He said Bianchi posted the car coming out of, okay, Jordan Bianchi tweeted a video of them pushing the car away from Tech saying that he passed. Okay, well, that's very promising. So hopefully we'll get final confirmation on this. We get a couple more bits of information. Pockers posting 2 minutes ago. Alex Bowman said he is not worried about being in the 88 next year. Whenever a sponsor leaves, it leads to questions. That's right. There's the issue of Nationwide leaving the team after this season. Rick Hendrick told him he is going to be in the car and he is confident. He is going to be in the car and he is confident he will be in it. So there's that. Let's see. Not looking at this information here. So still not seeing a call, at least on this page. We should be very close to it now. Let me check the time again. Okay, now we are about an hour and 10 minutes into the wait here. So the time continues to move along here. We will find out very shortly if the situation is. Jeff Green, we mentioned his surgery for a rotator cuff surgery that's going to be coming up this year after the Kentucky race, his home track. Certainly do wish him the very best in his upcoming recuperation there. Will be out of the number 38 car for the rest of this year, and apparently plans are in place to hopefully get him back into the series next year, although nothing is fully confirmed. Of course, there's a lot of racing to do between now and then. But that'll be interesting to see. But he is still the leader in the NASCAR Xfinity Series championship, even though he didn't get credit for the last place run after Christopher Bell's disqualification. He still leads the bottom 5 tiebreaker, and we've seen enough variety in the Xfinity Series last place finishers that and nothing is settled at all. So that'll be interesting going forward. Let's see. We got the rest of the results there. Anthony Alfredo, another good top 10 finish for him, almost besting his best run from Texas earlier this year, finishing in the 9th spot this time around the Steelsmith machine. I'm going to see Tyler Ankrum back in the number 17 truck. He had a great 4th place qualifying run, finishing 13th. Had a very difficult situation these last couple of weeks, having to drive start and park efforts for Nemco Motorsports after apparently a sponsorship deal with the TGR Crossley effort fell through. As he indicated on social media, Ankrum does have a continuing relationship with David Gilliland's team and will be running additional races for them. And this was one of those races, so glad he could get a good finish there, and hopefully that makes his effort easier going forward. Unfortunate to see Timmy Hill out with overheating problems on the number 56 truck there, finishing in the 24th spot. It seemed like that team had been really kind of cranking out finishes where they at least finished under power, which is a big accomplishment for these really small teams, and them trying to really get this effort going there, running their father, Jerry Hill's old number 56 on their trucks. So, and not seeing it on here. Looking at the Cup playoff grid with 9 races to go. Kyle Busch still the leader with Truex in 2nd, Keselowski 3rd, Joey Logano 4th in points, and Denny Hamlin 5th. Chase Elliott will outrank Alex Bowman in the point standings there, even though they both have 1 win. That's where their seedings are. And, of course, Harvick still the leader of drivers without a win, 194 points above the cut line. Still no confirmation, at least from Pockrass's page, about technical inspection. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that as well. Yeah, so we'll see what we'll see what happens with the Bianchi video. That's certainly very promising. We certainly do hope that the inspection went smoothly and we find out going ahead. But I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to bring up another thing that that actually kind of came to me after last week's show. As I mentioned on social media earlier today, we're doing our planning our next race coverage to start with Mosport at the end of August for the Truck Series weekend. And then following that up with Darlington the following weekend. Again, don't know what faculty that's going to be in. We are certainly going to make a bid for media credentials. But again, it's very competitive, especially at Darlington for that. But we'll do the very best that we can to get some good coverage there from the track and make that work as best as we can. But as part of that, the idea that came to me afterwards was the idea of the magnet that we're going to put on the car. So what we're going to do, the thought occurred to me by doing the Patreon and having people on board. I mean, they're basically, they're sponsors. I mean, they really are. So what my thought was to take something maybe about the size of the back of this computer screen here, and just make it with like a LASCAR logo, and then put everybody's name on it. Then I was going to order the magnet and put that on the car somewhere. Now I'm hoping it doesn't grow legs and crawl away, because I'm hoping to have that on the car during the whole couple of weeks we're going to be out there on the road, and then bring it back. And then I'm going to have anybody that's in the Patreon there, I'm going to enter them in a drawing, and then one person will be randomly selected to win that. And I'll mail that out to you there. So I'm going to try something a little bit with that. We actually got a new Patreon member just during the race today. So big thanks to that person there. And we're looking ahead to getting that all set up, and looking ahead to the coverage there. And if that gets a good response, we're looking into doing the same thing for when we're going to do Phoenix and Texas in November, because that's going to involve kind of a road trip aspect of that too. So if this turns out to be something that people like, that'll be something to look ahead to. Okay, I'm starting to see again here that I've seen some more reports in the chat here about the passing inspection. Okay, we're getting it. They're getting it now through some more reports here. Okay, so saying Bowman passed tech. Yeah. I mean, there's any number. I'm not going to be too. There's certainly people have like firsthand sites there of the inspection results. It's just once it gets to the point where you have like some of the other people that I follow on here, if it's like Pockrass or Gluck or anything, and they're all starting to post it at that point, I'm pretty prepared to make the call at that point. By seeing the owner points on there or the driver points on there, I imagine we're pretty close to that at this point. Let's check the timer again on this. Yeah, we're now down to about an hour and 18 minutes into the wait here, so that's right within the window. Yeah, we're past the 10:30 p.m. Eastern time slot. You're again still waiting for the technical inspection results to come through. I'm still seeing some more congratulations from other teams coming through. Let me check this one. This was posted an hour ago, so that's not anything new on that. Okay, I'm seeing the Jordan Bianchi post here, officially giving Bowman his first ever Cup Series victory. Car pushed through inspection. So again, it's always hard to find the body language there or anything. I mean, that certainly does look promising, but and especially given the traffic that we had actually earlier at the Xfinity race. I believe Mike Harmon's spotter was posting pictures of the Christopher Bell car, and she said that she knew that car was too low just from looking at it. So hopefully this is a situation where, it's not the same thing. But once we get an official word, or at least a word that's communicated through a couple of these other channels, we'll be able to make the call very soon. It shouldn't take too much longer, but we're setting up for it here pretty soon. Again, looking at the Bianchi deal there. So, really pleased to see this many people here in the chat tonight too. I know we've had it's been a little unusual here for the show the last couple of weeks. We had of course, the rain delayed Michigan race, the Monday night Michigan race, and doing that. And then for Sonoma, we did kind of a wrap-up show after that. I thought about doing something at the track there, but that really wasn't feasible at the time. at least for the format that we have going on here. But it seemed like by the time I turned back around, they were already disassembling the Room of Doom. So at that point, it was pretty clear that there weren't any disqualifications over at Sonoma, at least at the time that I was there. Let me see. I also have some more content from Sonoma that I want to post up here the next few days as well. I've just been sorting through some more material from that weekend, and we'll get that all situated here. We'll have some more updates on that coming up. So I'll open the floor here again. If anybody has any other questions we want to cover here while we're waiting in the 11th hour here. But somebody asked me earlier what my favorite race is. Like, I mean, there's, you know, it's really tricky to pick one. I mean, my focus has always been more on the Cup Series than Xfinity and trucks. Although there's certainly races in those that have definitely enjoyed. You know, fond memories of the first Truck Series race at Eldora with Norm Benning getting into the show there through the last chance qualifier. The Xfinity Series, first thing I always want to pick in that is going to be any of the races at the old Circuit Gilles Villeneuve there. I think that was just a prize date that they shouldn't have let slip by. I don't care, you know, if they want to run a monster truck rally at the halfway point of the race. I mean, they should find a way to get that back on the schedule. But you know, somebody in the Cup Series, you know, one I always think of is back to Ricky Rudd's win at Martinsville in 1998 when he was dealing with the heat. We talked about heat on the website there last week and issues of air circulation in the cars. Even being an issue back then when you still had the passenger side window open on short tracks, almost passing out. You had a lot of comers and goers in that race, a lot of drivers that were challenging for the win and then fell by the wayside. Sterling Marlin had issues. By the way, happy birthday to Sterling Marlin. I understand today is his birthday. Issues for the 40 car back in that one. Jeff Burton was absolutely just exhausted in that one, just hanging on at the finish. But through it all, you had, again, very similar to Sonoma, an outstanding driver finishing in the fourth place position, becoming a big story. And that year was Rich Bickle driving for Cale Yarborough Motorsports, one of the last great moments for that team and a career moment really for that driver outside of his success in the Truck Series. You know, saying that it would be, you know, his this felt like winning to him. That was the moment that always sticks to me. So yeah, I would say 98 at Martinsville. That would probably be my favorite race in general across even the top three series. What would you say is my favorite decade in NASCAR? I mean, certainly the 90s. I mean, I would say. I mean, just from personal experience, you know, the 2000s had a whole range of things going on. I mean, it's really hard it's hard for me to still view that as an era because you had so many things going on between from the death of Dale Earnhardt through the introduction of the car of tomorrow and then so forth. But certainly the 90s in general, when putting together that video there on the channel about why late 90s NASCAR was awesome, it really kind of made me re-examine that to a degree and think about just the personalities there were back then and how those personalities were portrayed. I'm glad, kind of bringing it full circle with NBC. I liked the segment that they did with the little girl interviewing the drivers, where each driver kind of revealed their own personality and got to see them kind of, you know, kind of play off each other that way. It still wasn't one of those segments where you kind of have the drivers all standing together, something close to that old Coca-Cola ad where they're all playing with remote control cars and Tony Stewart wins and, you know, Kevin Harvick's crew runs over it with a golf cart. You know, stuff like that where you see them kind of, you know, as you know, this brotherhood of speed kind of thing, this thing where they're all kind of, you know, their different approaches to racing are shown in that way. That would be interesting. But that would be, yeah, really a big part that I always look at there. Let's see. Yeah, favorite race of all time. Just looking through the comments here. Opinion on the Andy Sue stuff. Looking at Michael Harvey's comment there from earlier. I mean, any opportunity to get somebody up there into the Cup Series, even if it's just for like one start or anything like that. I think Alex Bowman's race today really proves the value of that. That, you know, sometimes it just takes a race or just a couple to really get somebody's attention. And also, let's not forget, I mean, you got Andy Sue, and you also have Austin Theriault driving for Rick Ware Racing coming up there as well. Terrio has gone through a lot just in the truck series there and trying to get things going. I believe he drove for Ricky Benton's team earlier this year at Martinsville, and well, I guess Timothy Peters drove that truck as well. I think Terrio ran it at Martinsville if I remember correctly. But again, talents that we don't see that often because they just either there's not enough rides, or just not enough opportunities. Andy Seuss is very much in the same sense. They were running one truck race, and I believe he had an accident in that driving for Make Motorsports, the #1 years ago. But that would be interesting to see. But yeah, and Corey LaJoie fan, yeah, definitely very excited about Daytona. That's one that's on my bucket list here. I'm not going this year, but something to maybe look going further ahead. But that would be interesting. Let's see. Oh gosh, people talk about the "Let's Go Racing Boys" song. Yeah, take it back to 2008. Talk about a throwback in that sense. That's another thing I'm kind of working on in anticipation for Darlington weekend. I have kind of a throwback themed thing I'm kind of working on. I'm still not exactly sure how to work it out, but I'll have some more information on that when we get closer to the date. Yeah, I have some ideas on that to kind of help celebrate that. Some ideas that kind of just rattling in my mind when we were last there in 2017, and looking to kind of try that out. Let's see. There we go. Here, Bowman the Showman. Solid race. Yeah. So really enjoying the comments here and just checking that out. Oh gosh, yeah, the ARCA title for Terrio. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, I mean, see again, it speaks to a lot of these drivers. They're just trying to get up the ranks. They're trying to get whatever opportunities they can get, and you never know which is going to be the one. And with Terrio in particular, it sounded like getting into a cup race, even if it was no matter who he's driving for or how long it is, just doing one of them. That was like a life goal for him. So, great job by the Rick Ware team there, and also, great job by this got some traffic earlier today, and justifiably so. Where was the post? I want to make sure I attribute this to the right person. The Good Samaritan effort for Bar Visuals there. I believe Dalen Barr does do fantastic photography. If you check out his work at Bar Visuals on Twitter, I mean, just does amazing work. He had an unfortunate situation on a flight there where his camera equipment was destroyed when it fell off a baggage ramp there getting on a flight. And then just a little bit later, Rick Ware Racing posted a tweet there saying, Hey, buddy, photographer equivalent of cutting a tire down. Get a hold of Lisa, round up your invoices. Rick Ware Racing will get people together and replace your equipment before Daytona. So many people appreciate what you do, buddy. God bless. Absolutely huge effort there. I think that's really another thing that points to the value of a lot of these small teams and what they have to offer and what flavor they offer to the sport there. The level of interaction and everything is a lot more close to the vest, and this is a tremendous thing for Rick Ware's effort. But there's good people working over there. They work very hard to get these cars out there. They may not be the fastest cars out there, but they're living the dream. Just like we talked about Austin Terrio trying to get in there to just even start a race. For a person like Rick, who's been in sports cars and road course racing for all those years, that's a big accomplishment for them. Is just to even show up at the track. It's amazing to see them now field 3 cars out there at a time in the Cup Series. I can't imagine how difficult that is compared to even in the Xfinity Series when you see Carl Long's team running 4 cars, or the Truck Series where you have DTR Crosley entering even more entries with the new 5 truck that they had for Dylan Lupton. An interesting situation there. I mean, they're doing it the absolute hardest, most difficult situation that they could. And at a time where we're seeing teams like Furniture Row Racing and H. Scott Motorsports and Tommy Baldwin's team and so many others that have closed over the years or just been squeezed out of full-time competition completely, they're still hanging in there, picking up charters and doing the very best that they can. So, kudos to them. I mean, it's been interesting seeing them progress over the years. I know talking with Cody when he was trying to make his debut at Sears Point with Premium Motorsports a few years ago, unfortunately didn't make the race, but since then getting back into the show, driving for the family's team, the number 52. But yeah, definitely interesting to see. I'm now seeing another tweet on Pockrass's page. We may have a call here. Let's check this. Okay, 49 seconds ago, we do have a call confirmed from the Bianchi Post. Quote from Bob Pockrass: NASCAR says Tech is complete. Alex Bowman has passed Tech. He is the winner. One lug nut not safe or secure on the Denny Hamlin car, which is a fine. So that is the tweet. So Alex Bowman officially the winner of his first Cup Series race. We do not have a disqualification, at least among the leaders. And so Quinn Huff will be your feature this week, and the first ever last place finish for driver, team, and the track bar reason out. So the article on that will come up later tonight. So congratulations again to Alex Bowman on his first career victory tonight. Well deserved. Congratulations to him and the team. Right as the timer goes off here as well. So perfect timing on that. So fantastic for him on that. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in here to the Disqualification Show. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up here for tonight. But stay tuned. We're going to be back here next week for the show following Daytona. Having a very enjoyable and safe Independence Day, 4th of July weekend, or for our Canadian friends, tomorrow's Canada Day. Enjoy the summer, and we'll be back next week. So, again, congratulations to Alex Bowman. In the meantime, LastCar.info is the website, at LastCarOnBrock is the Twitter, and Patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock is the Patreon. Thank you again for your support, and stay tuned for more Last Place news in the days and weeks ahead.